Picture this. You're driving through the Nevada desert on a moonless night. The highway stretches endlessly ahead, your headlights cutting through darkness so complete it seems to swallow sound itself. Miles pass without another soul in sight. Then, in your rearview mirror, you notice something, unusual, a light, moving in ways that defy everything you know about aircraft. It hovers, accelerates impossibly fast, then vanishes. You pull over, heart racing, scanning the star-filled sky. Nothing, just the eternal silence of the desert and a question that will haunt you forever. What did you just witness? For over 70 years, this question has echoed through government corridors, military briefing rooms, and the minds of ordinary people who glimpsed something extraordinary. Tonight, we embark on a journey through the shadows of secrecy, following breadcrumbs of evidence that suggest something remarkable. We may not be alone on this planet. Not anymore. Perhaps not for decades. Welcome to a mystery that spans continents and decades, where truth and fiction blur like heat mirages on asphalt. This is the story of hidden visitors, and the possibility that they're not just visiting. They're living among us. Chapter 1. The Desert That Hides More Than Sand. The Mojave Desert stretches across Southern California and Nevada like an alien landscape itself. Vast, unforgiving, beautiful in its desolation. Here, where summer temperatures soar beyond human endurance and winter nights can freeze the unprepared, the United States government chose to hide its most sensitive secrets. It was 1955 when the Central Intelligence Agency, working with Lockheed's secretive Skunk Works division, needed a place to test aircraft so advanced they seemed to belong in science fiction. They found it in a dried lake bed called Groom Lake, nestled within the Nevada test site, an area already secured and sanitized for atomic bomb testing. The base that would become known as Area 51 began as a simple necessity, somewhere to test the U-2 spy plane without Soviet satellites or curious civilians witnessing America's most classified reconnaissance capabilities. The location was perfect, isolated, protected, and so remote that if something did go wrong, few would be around to see it. But isolation breeds rumors, and secrecy feeds speculation. Local ranchers and miners had worked this land for decades. They knew every ridge, every canyon, every quirk of light and shadow. So when they began seeing things in the sky that moved unlike any aircraft they'd ever witnessed, objects that could hover motionless, then accelerate to impossible speeds, changing direction at angles that should have torn apart any human pilot, they began to wonder. The government's explanations were always the same. Experimental aircraft, weather phenomena, misidentified conventional planes. But the witnesses knew what they'd seen, and they knew it wasn't from any earthly manufacturer. Consider this. In 1947, an object crashed near Roswell, New Mexico, roughly 500 miles southeast of what would become Area 51. The military initially announced they'd recovered a flying disc, then quickly retracted the statement, claiming it was merely a weather balloon. The correction felt forced, unnatural. It raised more questions than it answered. What if that crash wasn't the end of something, but the beginning? What if the debris and other materials recovered from that New Mexico ranch weren't destroyed or filed away, but studied? And what if the perfect place to conduct such studies was a secret base in the Nevada desert, where the skies were clear, the security absolute, and the nearest curious eyes were hundreds of miles away? The pieces begin to form a picture. But like a jigsaw puzzle worked in dim light, the image remains frustratingly incomplete. Each new piece raises fresh questions. If we recovered alien technology in 1947, what have we learned from it? If we encountered alien beings, what happened to them? And most unsettling of all, if they came here once, did others follow? The desert keeps its secrets well, but secrets have a way of surfacing, like bones bleached white by the merciless sun. And in the decades since that first mysterious crash, witnesses have reported encounters that suggest something far more complex than simple government testing. They speak of beings that walk upright but aren't quite human, of technologies that operate on principles our physics can't explain, of a presence that feels ancient and patient, as if waiting for something. But waiting for what? And how long have they been waiting? Chapter 2. The Birth of Secrecy. To understand how visitors from another world might hide among us, we must first understand how humans learned to hide from each other. The year was 1947, the same year as the Roswell incident. President Harry Truman signed the National Security Act, creating the CIA and establishing the framework for America's deep state apparatus. It was also the year the Air Force became an independent military branch, and the year that Project Blue Book, the military's official UFO investigation program, had its quiet, unofficial beginnings. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps the timing tells us everything we need to know about what really happened that summer in New Mexico. Imagine you're a general in 1947. The war is over, but the Soviet threat looms. Your country has just demonstrated the ultimate weapon, the atomic bomb, but your enemies are racing to build their own. Then, suddenly, technology crashes from the sky that makes your most advanced aircraft look like paper airplanes. Technology that operates on principles your best scientists can't comprehend. What do? The answer, it seems, was to build an infrastructure of secrecy so complete, so compartmentalized, that even those working within it might not understand the full scope of what they were protecting. The need-to-know principle became sacred. Information was divided into fragments, with no single person holding enough pieces to see the complete picture. This wasn't just about protecting state secrets from foreign adversaries. This was about protecting humanity from a truth it might not be ready to handle, that we are not the dominant intelligence on this planet. Documents that have surfaced through Freedom of Information Act requests paint a picture of frantic activity in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Military personnel were being transferred to remote locations. Scientists with Chapter 3. The skies that whisper. Janet Airlines Flight 4805 departed McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas every morning at 6:45 a.m. sharp. To casual observers, it looked like any other commuter flight, a Boeing 737 painted in simple white livery with red trim. But casual observers wouldn't notice the lack of airline logos, the absence of passenger windows, or the fact that Flight 4805's destination never appeared on any departure board. The plane carried a very special cargo. Men and women with the highest security clearances in the American government, bound for places that officially didn't exist. For decades, residents of Rachel, Nevada, population 98, watched these unmarked flights cross their sky like clockwork. The planes would disappear beyond the mountains, toward restricted airspace that stretched for miles in every direction. Sometimes they'd return the same day. Sometimes they wouldn't return for weeks. What were these passengers working on in the desert beyond the mountains? The official answer was always the same: classified aircraft development. stealth technology, spy planes, experimental weapons systems, but the locals had their own theories. Based on what they witnessed in their night sky, Sarah Chen was driving home from her job as a nurse in Las Vegas when she first saw them. 3 objects, glowing soft orange, moving in perfect formation across the star-filled sky. They moved unlike any aircraft she'd ever seen, stopping instantly, hovering motionless, then accelerating to impossible speeds without the slightest sound. I pulled over and watched for maybe 10 minutes, she later told investigators. They seemed to be communicating with each other somehow, changing positions in patterns that looked almost ... choreographed, like they were performing some kind of aerial dance. Sarah's account was remarkably similar to hundreds of others collected over the years. Witnesses described objects that seemed to defy the basic laws of physics, displaying capabilities that suggested technology far beyond anything in the public domain. But here's what made these accounts particularly intriguing. Many of the witnesses were themselves connected to the classified world. Air Force personnel, defense contractors, engineers with top-secret clearances. These weren't people prone to hysteria or misidentification. They knew the difference between experimental aircraft and something else entirely. In 1989, a man named Bob Lazar appeared on Las Vegas television claiming to have worked at a facility called S4. Located near Area 51, Lazar's story was extraordinary. He claimed to have been hired to reverse engineer alien spacecraft, analyzing propulsion systems that operated on principles unknown to human science. Lazar described craft that used an element not found on the periodic table, element 115, to manipulate gravity itself. He spoke of technology that could bend space-time, making interstellar travel possible. Most remarkably, he claimed that these weren't just theoretical studies, but practical engineering projects. The government, according to Lazar, was actively attempting to understand and replicate alien technology. The scientific community dismissed Lazar's claims as fantasy. Element 115 didn't exist, they said. His descriptions of the physics involved were impossible. His educational credentials couldn't be verified. But then, in 2003, element 115 was successfully synthesized in a laboratory for the first time. It existed for only milliseconds before decaying, but it existed. Suddenly, one piece of Lazar's impossible story became possible. What if the lights in the Nevada sky weren't just alien visitors conducting surveillance? What if they were joint operations, human and non-human crews working together, testing hybrid technologies, conducting missions that served both species' interests? This would explain much why the sightings often occurred near military installations, why they seemed to follow patterns suggesting familiarity with restricted airspace, why the government's responses always seemed to know more than they admitted. It would also explain why the phenomena didn't end with the Cold War. If anything, reports of unusual aerial activity increased through the 1990s and into the new millennium. Whatever was happening in the Nevada desert wasn't tied to any single geopolitical crisis. It was something longer term, more fundamental. But if human and alien technology were being merged, if our species were somehow collaborating, what was the ultimate goal? What were we building together in the hidden facilities beyond the mountains? And why was it so important that the rest of humanity remain unaware? The desert wind carries no answers, only more questions. But sometimes, in the stillness just before dawn, when the commercial flights from Las Vegas cross the restricted airspace on their way to nowhere, You can almost hear something else in their engines. Not quite mechanical, not quite natural, almost as if the sky itself were whispering secrets it's not quite ready to tell. Chapter 4. The underground network beneath the Nevada desert. Something vast stirs in darkness. The Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository was officially cancelled in 2010. Its tunnels abandoned after decades of construction and billions of dollars in investment. Officially, but satellite imagery shows continued activity at the site, unmarked vehicles. Heat signatures suggesting ongoing operations. Construction equipment that appears and disappears without explanation. What if Yucca Mountain was never about nuclear waste? What if it was always about something else entirely? Underground facilities have a long history in the American West. NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado. The Strategic Petroleum. Reserve caverns in Texas. Countless military installations. Buried so deep that even direct nuclear strikes couldn't penetrate them. But the network beneath the Nevada desert appears to be different, larger, more complex, and according to some accounts, not entirely human in design. In 1995, a structural engineer named Philip Schneider gave a lecture that would change his life and ultimately end it. Schneider claimed to have worked on the construction of deep underground military bases, or DUMBs, across the American Southwest. These weren't simple bunkers or storage facilities, he said, but vast underground cities connected by high-speed transportation systems. According to Schneider, the Dulce base in New Mexico was the crown jewel of this network, a 7-level facility that extended more than 2 miles underground. But what made Schneider's account truly extraordinary was his claim about who was living there. I was involved in building an addition to the deep underground military base at Dulce. Schneider told his audience, I was involved in a firefight with alien humanoids, and I was one of the survivors. I'm probably the only talking survivor you'll ever hear. Schneider described beings that were clearly not human, but had been coexisting with military personnel for decades. He spoke of shared technologies, joint research projects, and agreements between human and non-human intelligences that dated back to the 1940s. The scientific community dismissed Schneider as a charlatan. UFO researchers questioned the more sensational aspects of his story, but construction records from the period he described show massive underground projects throughout the Southwest, projects whose scale and purpose remain classified to this day. 7 months after his final public lecture, Philip Schneider was found dead in his apartment, an apparent suicide. The official cause of death was strangulation, but friends and family insisted he had no reason to take his own life. They pointed to his work exposing government secrets, his scheduled lectures, and the fact that he'd recently spoken about receiving death threats. Schneider's death might have been tragic but forgettable, except for what happened next. Other individuals claiming knowledge of underground alien bases began dying under mysterious circumstances. Accidents, suicides, sudden illnesses, always with plausible explanations. But the pattern was unmistakable. Someone didn't want this story told, but the underground network isn't just about military bases. Researchers have identified a pattern of unusual seismic activity throughout the American Southwest. Not earthquakes, but regular, rhythmic vibrations that suggest massive machinery operating deep beneath the surface. In 2019, seismologists at the University of Nevada detected what they called anomalous underground signatures throughout the region. The patterns were consistent with large-scale excavation or transportation systems, but their depth and extent suggested something far beyond any known construction project. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a geologist who studied the data, made a disturbing observation. The activity patterns don't match any natural phenomena we know of, and they don't match any human construction project either. The depth alone would require technology we don't possess, and the coordination across such vast distances would require a level of infrastructure that simply doesn't exist in the public record. What kind of infrastructure operates that deep, across such vast distances, with such precise coordination? Perhaps most intriguing are the reports from telecommunications workers who have stumbled across evidence of this hidden network. Fiber optic cables that don't appear on any schematic, communication relays that broadcast on frequencies reserved for classified military use, data streams carrying encrypted information between locations that officially don't exist. In 2016, a technician working for a major internet service provider discovered a fiber optic junction box in a supposedly abandoned mineshaft in Nevada. The equipment was unlike anything in the civilian infrastructure, more advanced, more heavily shielded, and carrying data loads that suggested massive computational operations nearby. When he reported the discovery to his supervisors, he was told to forget what he'd seen and reassigned to a different region. The mineshaft was sealed 2 weeks later, officially due to geological instability. The implications are staggering. If an advanced non-human intelligence has established a presence beneath the American Southwest, they haven't just been visiting, they've been building, creating infrastructure, establishing a permanent foothold on our planet. But why? What do they need from us that requires such an extensive underground presence? And what have we agreed to give them in return for whatever technology and knowledge they've shared? The answers may lie deeper still, in facilities so classified that even their existence is compartmentalized across multiple agencies, in laboratories where human and alien scientists work side by side on projects that could reshape both species, in meeting rooms where agreements are negotiated that could determine the future of Earth itself. But first, we must understand the currency of these negotiations. What do advanced beings from another world consider valuable? What could primitive humans possibly offer to entities capable of crossing the vast emptiness between stars? The answer may be more disturbing than we've imagined. Chapter 5. The Element 115 Mystery. In the deepest vaults of the Los Alamos National Laboratory, secured behind layers of clearance protocols that few humans will ever penetrate, sits a small sample of what might be the most important material on Earth, Element 115. Moscovium, a superheavy element that exists for mere milliseconds in our laboratories, but which may hold the key to technologies that could revolutionize human civilization or destroy it entirely. When Bob Lazar first spoke publicly about Element 115 in 1989, the scientific establishment ridiculed his claims. The element didn't exist, they said. It was fantasy. The ramblings of a man whose credentials couldn't be verified and whose story defied known physics. But Lazar was remarkably specific in his descriptions. He claimed that stable isotopes of element 115 were used in alien propulsion systems to amplify gravity waves, creating a localized distortion in space-time that allowed spacecraft to travel at impossible speeds without experiencing inertia. More intriguingly, he claimed that the United States government had acquired a substantial quantity of this stable element 115, not through synthesis in terrestrial laboratories, but as part of the technology recovered from crashed alien spacecraft. Dr. Ali Vasquez was a materials physicist working at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory when she first encountered something that shouldn't have existed. It was 2001, and she was conducting routine analysis on what she'd been told were exotic materials recovered from foreign weapon systems. The sample was small, barely visible to the naked eye, but its properties were unlike anything in the known universe. It was incredibly dense, yet seemed to interact with electromagnetic fields in ways that violated conventional physics. Most remarkably, it appeared to be stable, showing none of the rapid decay characteristic of superheavy elements. I ran the analysis 3 times. Dr. Vasquez later told investigators in a classified debriefing. Each time, the results were the same. This was element 115, but it wasn't behaving like the unstable isotopes we could synthesize. It was as if someone had solved the island of stability problem that our theoretical physicists said was impossible. The island of stability, a theoretical region of the periodic table where elements might exist in stable forms, was purely hypothetical in 2001, yet here was evidence that such stability might be achievable, possibly by methods unknown to human science. Dr. Vasquez's security clearance was revoked 6 months later, and she was reassigned to a different project. The official reason was failure to follow proper security protocols, but colleagues noted that she'd become increasingly paranoid about her work, claiming that her research was being shared with individuals who weren't part of any official government program. She started talking about scientists who didn't seem entirely human, one former colleague recalled. People who understood the physics better than our best theorists, but who asked questions that suggested they came from a completely different scientific tradition. She said they were particularly interested in applications of element 115 that we'd never considered. What applications? What could an advanced alien civilization want to do with superheavy elements that human scientists couldn't imagine? The answer may lie in the reports from remote viewers, psychics employed by various government agencies to gather intelligence through extrasensory means. While their methods remain controversial, remote viewers have occasionally provided accurate information about classified projects, suggesting abilities that conventional science can't explain. In 2003, a remote viewer working for a classified program filed a report that was immediately sealed and has never been officially acknowledged. According to leaked excerpts, the viewer described a vast facility beneath the Nevada desert where human and non-human scientists were collaborating on technology that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. The viewer's description was remarkably detailed. Massive particle accelerators arranged in geometric patterns that seemed to serve purposes beyond simple elemental synthesis. Laboratories where stable superheavy elements were being used to create materials with impossible properties, substances that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, or that could phase in and out of our reality at will. Most disturbing was the viewer's description of the ultimate goal of this research: the creation of a bridge between Earth and another location, possibly another planet, possibly another dimension entirely. If this account has any basis in reality, it suggests that element 115 isn't just about propulsion technology. It's about creating permanent connections across impossible distances. It's about establishing infrastructure for travel and communication on a cosmic scale. But why would alien visitors need human cooperation for such projects? Why not simply build their bridges using their own technology and resources? The answer may be more unsettling than comfortable. Perhaps stable element 115 isn't something that can be easily manufactured, even by advanced alien civilizations. Perhaps it requires resources or conditions that are rare in the universe, conditions that Earth happens to provide, or perhaps the physics of interdimensional bridges requires something unique to each location, a quantum signature that can only be generated by native intelligence working in cooperation with external knowledge. In 2016, Dr. Vasquez disappeared while hiking alone in the Nevada desert. Search teams found her car parked at a remote trailhead, but no trace of her was ever discovered. The official conclusion was that she'd become lost and died of exposure, her body consumed by desert scavengers. But her final research notes, discovered in a safe deposit box after her death, tell a different story. In her last entries, she wrote about breakthrough discoveries in elemental stability, about technologies that could revolutionize human understanding of physics, and about collaborators who see the universe from a perspective we can barely comprehend. Her final entry, dated 3 days before her disappearance, consisted of a single line: "The bridge is almost complete. God help us all." What bridge? Complete to where? And what did Dr. Vasquez discover that made her so afraid? The desert keeps its secrets, but sometimes the wind carries whispers of truth. And what it whispers suggests that element 115 is more than just exotic matter. It's a key to doors that perhaps should remain locked, to connections that might change the very nature of reality itself. But keys can be turned by anyone who possesses them. And if that key has fallen into the wrong hands, human or otherwise, the consequences could reshape our world in ways we're not prepared to understand. Chapter 6. Alleged alien remains in a climate-controlled vault deep within Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Something waits in preservation that would fundamentally challenge our understanding of life itself, according to whistleblowers who claim to have worked within the most classified corridors of the military-industrial complex. The vault contains biological specimens unlike anything in our fossil record or taxonomic classifications, remains that suggest intelligence evolved along pathways entirely different from terrestrial life. Dr. Jonathan Reed was an Air Force pathologist in the 1970s when he received the most unusual assignment of his career. He was told to report to a facility that didn't appear on any official base map, carrying only his medical credentials and a clearance level higher than anything he'd previously possessed. "I expected to examine human remains," Reed later recounted in classified testimony that was leaked decades later. "What I found instead challenged everything I thought I understood about biology, about evolution, about life itself." Reed described beings that were clearly not human, yet possessed anatomical features suggesting intelligence comparable to or exceeding our own. Brain cases proportionally larger than any primate, skeletal structures that appeared optimized for environments with different gravitational conditions. Most remarkably, cellular structures that seemed to incorporate elements not found in terrestrial biology. Their DNA, if you could call it DNA, contained base pairs we'd never seen, Reed testified. It was as if they'd evolved from an entirely different primordial soup, using chemical processes that our textbooks said were impossible. But Reed's account was just one among many. Over the decades, numerous medical personnel, pathologists, and research scientists have come forward with similar stories. They speak of facilities where human doctors work alongside non-human consultants, examining specimens and conducting research that advances both species' understanding of biology and medicine. Dr. Sarah Chen, not the nurse from our earlier chapter, but a forensic pathologist working for a government contractor, described examining remains that appeared to be thousands of years old, yet were preserved in a state that suggested technology far beyond anything in our archaeological record. The preservation wasn't natural. Chen explained in a recorded interview before her death in 2018. These weren't mummies or fossils. They were more like suspended animation, as if the beings had been placed in some kind of stasis that prevented cellular decay indefinitely. But perhaps the most intriguing accounts come from medical researchers who claim that these examinations weren't purely academic. They suggest that alien biology and human physiology are being studied together, with the goal of creating hybrid technologies that could benefit both species. Dr. Michael Harrison, a geneticist who claimed to have worked on classified projects throughout the 1980s and 1990s, described research that pushed the boundaries of medical ethics. He spoke of attempts to understand how alien immune systems could resist diseases that devastated human populations, of studies examining alien neural structures that might explain their apparent psychic abilities, of efforts to identify biological mechanisms that allowed their bodies to withstand the extreme forces of interstellar travel. The question wasn't just what we could learn from them. Harrison testified in a deathbed confession recorded by his family. It was what we could become if we integrated their biological advantages with our own. This research may have produced results that extend far beyond academic knowledge. Multiple witnesses have described medical facilities where human patients receive treatments that seem to incorporate alien biotechnology, healing processes that accelerate cellular regeneration beyond natural rates, surgical procedures that repair damage previously considered irreversible, medications that seem to enhance human cognitive abilities in ways that conventional pharmacology can't explain. But these treatments apparently come with a price. Patients reportedly experience side effects that suggest their biology is being fundamentally altered. Enhanced physical capabilities, but reduced fertility. Improved cognitive function, but changes in personality and emotional response. Extended lifespans, but growing disconnection from purely human experiences and perspectives. Sound of heart monitor Then silence. The most disturbing accounts suggest that some individuals have undergone more dramatic transformations. Reports speak of humans who've been so extensively modified that they can no longer be considered entirely human. Beings who possess the memories and personalities of their original selves, but whose biology has been enhanced or altered to the point where they represent a bridge between species. These hybrid beings allegedly serve as translators and intermediaries, helping to facilitate cooperation between human and alien researchers. They understand both biological systems intimately, making them invaluable for joint projects that require deep knowledge of both species' capabilities and limitations. But what happens to their humanity in the process? What do they lose when they gain the ability to perceive reality from a non-human perspective? In 2019, a former military nurse named Rebecca Stone published a memoir that was immediately suppressed and removed from circulation. In it, she described working at a medical facility where she treated both humans and non-humans, often for injuries sustained during joint operations in environments hostile to both. Stone wrote about alien beings who seemed genuinely concerned about human welfare, but who approached medical treatment from perspectives that were sometimes difficult for human staff to understand. They appeared to view individual consciousness as less important than the continuation of knowledge and experience, leading to ethical conflicts about treatment priorities that human medical staff found deeply troubling. They could save anyone, Stone wrote in her suppressed memoir, but their definition of saving wasn't always the same as ours. Sometimes what they preserved wasn't quite the same person who'd been injured. These accounts paint a picture of medical cooperation that extends far beyond simple exchange of knowledge. They suggest that human and alien biology are being actively integrated, creating new forms of life that possess advantages of both species, while potentially losing essential characteristics of each. If such research is real, it raises profound questions about the future of human identity. Are we witnessing the natural evolution of our species through contact with more advanced beings? Or are we being systematically modified to serve purposes that we don't fully understand? The medical equipment in that vault at Wright-Patterson continues its endless monitoring, keeping watch over specimens that may hold the answers to these questions. But the answers themselves remain locked behind clearance levels that few humans will ever achieve. In research programs that operate beyond the boundaries of conventional ethics and human law, what they've discovered in their examination of alien remains may be the key to humanity's future. But whether that future still includes what we recognize as human consciousness remains an open question. Chapter 7. The Watchers Among You. They walk among us. Perhaps that sounds like the tagline from a science fiction thriller. But consider this. If an advanced alien intelligence wanted to study human civilization, how would they do it? Orbital observation would provide data about our technology and large-scale social patterns. But it couldn't reveal the subtle complexities of human psychology, culture, and individual behavior. For that, you'd need to get closer, much closer. In 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were driving through New Hampshire when they encountered something that would change their lives forever. What began as lights in the sky became a close encounter with beings who seemed intensely interested in understanding human biology and psychology. But the Hills' experience, dramatic as it was, represents only one type of contact. What if there were others? What if some alien beings had developed the ability to blend into human society so completely that their presence went undetected? Dr. David Jacobs, a historian who spent decades researching abduction phenomena, identified patterns in witness accounts that suggested something more systematic than random encounters. Abductees consistently reported seeing the same beings in mundane human settings, shopping malls, restaurants, schools, workplaces. But these beings seemed somehow ... off, not quite right. As if they were playing roles they didn't entirely understand. They looked human, one witness reported, but they moved differently. They stood differently. It was like watching someone who'd learned to be human from a textbook but hadn't quite mastered the subtleties. These encounters suggest the possibility that alien beings have developed sophisticated methods of camouflage, allowing them to observe human society from within rather than from a distance. Consider the case of Maria Santos, a human resources manager at a defense contractor in California. In 2015, she began noticing irregularities in personnel files for certain employees. Their background checks were perfect, too perfect. Their references always checked out. But when she dug deeper, She found that some of these references led to companies and institutions that had no record of the individuals in question. It was as if someone had created entire fictional backgrounds for these people. Santos later testified in a classified hearing. Complete life histories that looked authentic on the surface but fell apart under detailed scrutiny. But what troubled Santos most was the behavior of these employees themselves. They were extremely competent, often exceptionally so. They seemed to understand complex technical concepts intuitively, but they struggled with simple social interactions and cultural references that any human would understand naturally. One of them asked me to explain why humans laugh, Santos recalled. Not what makes things funny, why we have the physiological response of laughter at all. It was like they'd observed the behavior, but never experienced the emotion behind it. Santos' observations weren't unique. Across the defense industry, human resources personnel began reporting similar anomalies. Employees with perfect qualifications but puzzling gaps in cultural knowledge. Individuals who seemed to age differently than their colleagues, maintaining the same appearance over years, while everyone around them showed normal signs of aging. Most disturbing were the reports of employees who seemed to know things they shouldn't know, classified information they'd never been briefed on, technical details about projects they weren't assigned to, personal information about colleagues they'd never met before joining the company. The infiltration wasn't limited to defense contractors. Reports began surfacing from other sectors: healthcare, education, government agencies, technology companies. Always the same pattern: individuals with impeccable credentials, but subtle behavioral anomalies that suggested they weren't quite what they seemed. Dr. Patricia Wong was a psychiatrist working with government personnel when she began noticing a pattern in her patient files. Certain individuals displayed psychological profiles that didn't quite fit any known human parameters. Their emotional responses were muted, but not absent. Their problem-solving approaches were remarkably efficient, but lacked the intuitive leaps characteristic of human creativity. They seemed to understand human emotions intellectually without experiencing them viscerally. Dr. Wang noted in her classified reports, it was like treating patients who were exceptionally sophisticated actors playing the role of being human. But Wang's most disturbing observation was how these individuals seemed to be learning. Each session revealed subtle improvements in their emotional responses and social behaviors, as if they were studying her reactions and adjusting their own accordingly. The implications are staggering. If alien beings have developed the ability to pass as human, they could be anywhere, in positions of influence and authority, making decisions that affect millions of people, gathering intelligence not just about our technology and military capabilities, but about our deepest psychological. Chapter 8: The Technology Exchange, the basement of a nondescript building in Silicon Valley. Something remarkable was happening. Engineers were developing technologies that shouldn't have been possible given the current state of human knowledge. Fiber optic systems that transmitted data at speeds beyond theoretical limits. Computer processors that operated on principles that seemed to violate established physics. Materials that displayed properties no terrestrial laboratory had ever achieved. The official explanation was breakthrough research, the natural progression of human ingenuity. But insiders whispered of something else entirely. A technology transfer program that had been operating in secret for decades. Dr. Robert Chen was a materials scientist working for a major defense contractor when he first encountered technology that challenged everything he thought he understood about physics and engineering. It was 1987, and he'd been assigned to a project with the innocuous designation Advanced Materials Research Initiative. They showed us materials that were clearly manufactured, but using processes we couldn't identify, Chen later testified in classified hearings. Substances that were lighter than aluminum but stronger than steel. Conductors that carried electrical current with zero resistance at room temperature. Optical materials that could bend light in ways that our best theories said were impossible. The project team was told that these materials had been recovered from foreign sources, but Chen quickly realized that no human technology could have produced them. The atomic structures were too precise, the molecular arrangements too sophisticated for any terrestrial manufacturing process. What really convinced me was the way they wanted us to work, Chen recalled. They didn't want us to reverse engineer the materials exactly. They wanted us to understand the principles behind them and then figure out how to produce similar results using human manufacturing techniques. This approach, understanding alien principles and adapting them to human capabilities, appears to have been the foundation of technology transfer programs that may have been operating since the 1940s, rather than simply copying alien technology directly. Human scientists were apparently being guided to develop their own versions using Earth-based materials and processes. The advantages of this approach are obvious. Technologies developed through human innovation and manufacturing could be produced at scale using existing industrial infrastructure. They wouldn't require exotic materials or energy sources that might be difficult to obtain or sustain. But, perhaps more importantly, technologies developed through human understanding rather than alien copying would belong to humanity in a way that pure reverse never could. The aerospace industry provides some of the most compelling evidence for this type of technology transfer. The development of stealth technology, advanced radar systems, and exotic propulsion concepts accelerated dramatically in the decades following the Roswell incident. Ben Rich, the former head of Lockheed's Skunk Works division, made several cryptic statements before his death in 1995 that suggested he knew more about exotic technology than publicly acknowledged. In conversations with trusted colleagues, Rich allegedly stated that the technology gap between what was shown to the public and what was actually achievable was far greater than anyone imagined. We now have the technology to take E.T. home, Rich reportedly said, referring to the iconic movie about a stranded alien. When pressed for details, he would only add that the technology had been inherited rather than developed from scratch. Computer technology shows similar patterns of inexplicable advancement. The development of integrated circuits, fiber optics, and advanced materials used in electronics all showed sudden leaps in capability that seemed to exceed the normal pace of technological evolution. Dr. Jack Kilby, co-inventor of the integrated circuit, privately expressed puzzlement about how certain breakthrough insights occurred to him. In interviews with close friends, he described moments of inspiration that felt more like memories than discoveries, as if he were recalling solutions, rather than inventing them. Sometimes I would wake up with complete understanding of complex engineering problems that had been puzzling our entire team, Kilby reportedly told his family. The solutions were so elegant, so perfect, that they seemed to come from a mind far more sophisticated than my own. The medical field has witnessed similar anomalous advances. Diagnostic technologies like MRI and CAT scans, surgical techniques that seem to leap ahead of theoretical understanding. pharmaceutical discoveries that appeared to bypass normal research and development timelines. Dr. Raymond Damadian, inventor of the MRI machine, described his breakthrough insights in terms that suggested external inspiration. He spoke of understanding principles of nuclear magnetic resonance. Chapter 8: The Technology Exchange in the basement of a nondescript building in Silicon Valley. Something remarkable was happening. Engineers were developing technologies that shouldn't have been possible given the current state of human knowledge. Fiber optic systems that transmitted data at speeds beyond theoretical limits. Computer processors that operated on principles that seemed to violate established physics. Materials that displayed properties no terrestrial laboratory had ever achieved. The official explanation was breakthrough research, the natural progression of human ingenuity. But insiders whispered of something else entirely. A technology transfer program that had been operating in secret for decades. Dr. Robert Chen was a materials scientist working for a major defense contractor when he first encountered technology that challenged everything he thought he understood about physics and engineering. It was 1987, and he'd been assigned to a project with the innocuous designation Advanced Materials Research Initiative. They showed us materials that were clearly manufactured, but using processes we couldn't identify, Chen later testified in classified hearings. Substances that were lighter than aluminum but stronger than steel. Conductors that carried electrical current with zero resistance at room temperature. Optical materials that could bend light in ways that our best theories said were impossible. The project team was told that these materials had been recovered from foreign sources. But Chen quickly realized that no human technology could have produced them. The atomic structures were too precise. The molecular arrangements too sophisticated for any terrestrial manufacturing process. What really convinced me was the way they wanted us to work, Chen recalled. They didn't want us to reverse engineer the materials exactly. They wanted us to understand the principles behind them and then figure out how to produce similar results using human manufacturing techniques. This approach, understanding alien principles and adapting them to human capabilities, appears to have been the foundation of technology transfer programs that may have been operating since the 1940s, rather than simply copying alien technology directly. Human scientists were apparently being guided to develop their own versions using Earth-based materials and processes. The advantages of this approach are obvious. Technologies developed through human innovation and manufacturing could be produced at scale using existing industrial infrastructure. They wouldn't require exotic materials or energy sources that might be difficult to obtain or sustain, but, perhaps more importantly, technologies developed through human understanding rather than alien copying would belong to humanity in a way that pure reverse never could. The aerospace industry provides some of the most compelling evidence for this type of technology transfer. The development of stealth technology, advanced radar systems, and exotic propulsion concepts accelerated dramatically in the decades following the Roswell incident. Ben Rich, the former head of Lockheed's Skunk Works division, made several cryptic statements before his death in 1995 that suggested he knew more about exotic technology than publicly acknowledged. In conversations with trusted colleagues, Rich allegedly stated that the technology gap between what was shown to the public and what was actually achievable was far greater than anyone imagined. "We now have the technology to take ET home," Rich reportedly said, referring to the iconic movie about a stranded alien. When pressed for details, he would only add that the technology had been inherited rather than developed from scratch. Computer technology shows similar patterns of inexplicable advancement. The development of integrated circuits, fiber optics, and advanced materials used in electronics all showed sudden leaps in capability that seemed to exceed the normal pace of technological evolution. Dr. Jack Kilby, co-inventor of the integrated circuit, privately expressed puzzlement about how certain breakthrough insights occurred to him. In interviews with close friends, he described moments of inspiration that felt more like memories than discoveries, as if he were recalling solutions rather than inventing them. Sometimes I would wake up with complete understanding of complex engineering problems that had been puzzling our entire team. Kilby reportedly told his family, "The solutions were so elegant, so perfect, that they seemed to come from a mind far more sophisticated than my own." The medical field has witnessed similar anomalous advances. Diagnostic technologies like MRI and CAT scans, surgical techniques that seemed to leap ahead of theoretical understanding, pharmaceutical discoveries that appeared to bypass normal research and development timelines. Dr. Raymond Damadian, inventor of the MRI machine, described his breakthrough insights in terms that suggested external inspiration. He spoke of understanding principles of nuclear magnetic resonance that hadn't been fully explored by academic research, yet somehow seemed familiar to him when he began working with them. It was as if the principles were already known to someone, and I was being shown how to apply them to medical diagnosis, Damadian told colleagues. The technology seemed to want to be discovered. Chapter 10: The Hybrid Children in a Private School Outside Phoenix, Arizona. Something extraordinary was happening in the second-grade classroom. The children were solving mathematical problems that shouldn't have been possible for their age group. They were demonstrating knowledge of concepts that hadn't been taught to them. Most remarkably, they seemed to communicate with each other without speaking, coordinating their activities with a precision that suggested some form of telepathic connection. These weren't exceptional human children. These were something new. Dr. Alina Vasquez, different from the physicist we met earlier, was an educational psychologist studying gifted children. When she first encountered what she would later describe as the new generation, these children appeared human in every physical respect, but their cognitive abilities and behavioral patterns suggested something unprecedented in human development. Their IQ scores were off the charts, Dr. Vasquez reported in classified briefings. But that wasn't what made them remarkable. What made them remarkable was how they thought. They approached problems from perspectives that seemed to incorporate knowledge and reasoning patterns that weren't quite human. These children demonstrated abilities that appeared to combine human creativity and emotional intelligence with cognitive capabilities that exceeded normal human parameters. They could solve complex problems intuitively, but they also showed empathy and emotional awareness that purely logical minds typically lacked. The children themselves seemed aware that they were different. They formed tight-knit social groups and often appeared uncomfortable around normal human children. Teachers reported that they would sometimes stop in the middle of activities and look around as if listening to something only they could hear. They would suddenly stop playing and stand very still, one teacher recalled. Then they would all move toward the windows and look up at the sky for several minutes before returning to their games. It happened regularly, maybe once or twice a week, always at different times, but always in perfect coordination. What were they looking for in the sky? What were they hearing that normal humans couldn't perceive? Perhaps more disturbing were the accounts from parents who began questioning their own memories of their children's conception and birth. Multiple families reported gaps in their recollections surrounding pregnancy and delivery, memories that seemed strangely vague or incomplete despite the significance of the events. Susan Chen, no relation. Two others mentioned was the mother of one of these exceptional children when she began recovering memories that suggested her pregnancy had involved more than conventional medical care. Under hypnotic regression, she described being taken to medical facilities that didn't resemble any hospital she'd ever seen, where she was examined by doctors who weren't entirely human. They were very gentle, she recalled, under hypnosis, and they seemed genuinely concerned about my welfare and the baby's health. But they were monitoring things that normal doctors don't check for. They seemed to be ensuring that the pregnancy would produce a child with very specific characteristics. Chen's account was remarkably similar to dozens of others. Women who had given birth to exceptional children often reported similar missing memories and fragmentary recollections of unusual medical procedures. The children born from these pregnancies consistently displayed the same pattern of enhanced cognitive abilities combined with human emotional characteristics, but these weren't traditional alien abduction accounts. The women described being treated with respect and care as voluntary participants in something important, rather than unwilling subjects of experimentation. They spoke of understanding, at least partially, that their children would be special and would serve important purposes in bridging two different forms of intelligence. Dr. Michael Harrison, a geneticist studying these cases, made a remarkable discovery when he analyzed DNA samples from the exceptional children. The genetic patterns were definitely human, he reported, but there were subtle variations that seemed to optimize certain cognitive functions. It was as if someone with advanced knowledge of human genetics had made very precise modifications to enhance specific capabilities while preserving human, emotional, and social characteristics. The implications are profound. If alien beings have been conducting a careful breeding program designed to create hybrid children who possess the best characteristics of both species, these children might represent the future of human evolution, or perhaps the evolution of both species simultaneously. But what purposes are these children being prepared for? What roles are they expected to play as they mature into adults? Follow-up studies of these children as they entered adolescence revealed even more remarkable developments. They began demonstrating knowledge of advanced scientific concepts without formal instruction. They showed intuitive understanding of technologies that hadn't been publicly revealed. Most significantly, they began displaying what could only be described as psychic abilities. They could sense things that normal humans couldn't detect, reported Dr. Sarah Martinez, who studied these adolescents for several years. They seemed to know when aircraft were approaching long before they became visible or audible. They could identify the contents of sealed packages without opening them. They appeared to communicate with each other telepathically, even when separated by considerable distances. These abilities weren't random or chaotic. They seemed to follow patterns that suggested systematic development and training. The teenagers appeared to be learning to use capabilities that were somehow built into their genetic structure. Chapter 11. The Hidden Agenda. The meeting never officially took place. No records exist in any government database. No attendees appear on any visitor logs. No agenda was distributed. No minutes were recorded. No follow-up memos were issued. Yet the decisions made in that room in 1954 may have fundamentally altered the trajectory of human civilization. The location was Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. The participants included President Dwight Eisenhower, select military leaders, intelligence officials, and representatives of several non-human intelligences who had been in contact with the U.S. government since the late 1940s. The subject was the terms of ongoing cooperation between human and alien civilizations, according to classified testimonies that have leaked over the decades. The meeting was the culmination of years of careful negotiation. The aliens had made contact following the nuclear weapons demonstrations at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, apparently concerned that humanity had developed destructive capabilities that could affect more than just Earth. But their concern wasn't purely altruistic. They had their own interests in ensuring that human development proceeded along sustainable lines. They had investments to protect. Dr. Michael Wolff, who claimed to have worked within the classified UFO programs for decades before going public in the 1990s, described the alien agenda in terms that were both reassuring and disturbing. "They're not here to conquer us," Wolff testified in his final interviews before his death. "They're here to guide us." But their definition of guidance isn't necessarily the same as ours. Desert wind intensifies. According to Wolff and other whistleblowers, the aliens presented humanity with a choice: accept their guidance and benefit from their advanced technology and knowledge, or continue developing independently and risk destroying ourselves through war, environmental destruction, or technological accidents. The choice seemed obvious, but the terms of their guidance weren't quite what human leaders had expected. The aliens wanted certain guarantees. They wanted assurance that human development would follow patterns they considered safe and sustainable. They wanted input into human technological development to ensure that certain dangerous discoveries weren't made prematurely. Most significantly, they wanted the right to study human society and biology to better understand how to integrate their own civilization with ours. In return, they offered gradual technology transfers that would accelerate human development by centuries. They offered solutions to energy and environmental problems. They offered medical knowledge that could eliminate most diseases and extend human lifespans dramatically. They offered eventual membership in what they described as a galactic community of intelligent species, but the agreement apparently came with restrictions that weren't fully understood at the time. Humanity would develop along paths approved by alien advisors. Technologies that the aliens considered dangerous would be suppressed or classified beyond human access. Most importantly, the existence of the agreement itself would remain secret until humanity was deemed ready to understand its implications. This would explain much about the seemingly contradictory nature of human technological development over the past 70 years. We've made remarkable advances in some areas: electronics, telecommunications, space technology, while other fields have stagnated or developed along paths that seem deliberately limited. Why? For example, have we failed to develop fusion power despite decades of research and massive investment? Why do our most advanced aircraft still rely on chemical propulsion when theoretical physics suggests far more efficient alternatives should be possible? Why have certain promising research directions been abandoned just as they seemed on the verge of breakthrough discoveries? The answer may be that these limitations aren't failures of human ingenuity, but restrictions imposed by our alien advisors to prevent us from developing capabilities they consider premature, dangerous. But what capabilities could be dangerous? Two beings advanced enough to travel between stars. What could humanity possibly discover that would threaten aliens whose technology is centuries or millennia ahead of ours? Dr. Paul Benowitz, an electrical engineer who spent years investigating alien activity near Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, claimed to have discovered evidence of a much darker agenda. According to Benowitz, the aliens weren't just guiding human development, they were systematically undermining human independence and preparing for eventual control of Earth's population. Benowitz described discovering electronic monitoring systems that could track and influence human behavior on a massive scale. He reported evidence of biological experimentation designed to create human-alien hybrids who would be loyal to alien rather than human interests. Most disturbing, he claimed to have found proof that the aliens were manipulating human governments and institutions to serve their long-term goals rather than human welfare. They're not here to help us evolve, Benowitz warned before his death under suspicious circumstances. They're here to manage us, to domesticate us, to turn us into a species that serves their purposes rather than our own. Benowitz's claims might have been dismissed as paranoid delusions, except that other researchers began uncovering similar evidence. Reports surfaced of alien bases where humans worked alongside non-humans on projects that seemed designed to increase alien influence over human society rather than human capabilities. These facilities, allegedly, conducted research into mass psychology, social control mechanisms, and methods of influencing human behavior without detection. The goal appeared to be developing techniques. Chapter 12. The Watcher's Dilemma. They never intended for it to become so complicated. When the first alien reconnaissance teams arrived in the 1940s, their missions seemed straightforward. Assess this primitive species that had somehow acquired nuclear weapons. Determine whether they posed a threat to galactic stability, and if necessary, intervene to prevent them from spreading their destructive capabilities beyond their own planet. But what they found challenged every assumption their civilization had made about intelligent life. Humans were violent, yes, but also capable of extraordinary compassion. They were primitive in their understanding of physics and technology, but displayed flashes of creative genius that produced solutions their own scientists had never considered. They were chaotic and unpredictable, but this same chaos generated art, music, literature, and philosophical insights that resonated even with alien minds. Most remarkably, they possessed something that advanced alien civilizations had apparently lost through millennia of logical evolution: the ability to make intuitive leaps that transcended pure reason. Dr. Elena Martinez was a xenobiologist, though she could never use that title publicly, who claimed to have worked directly with alien researchers studying human psychology and behavior. According to her sealed testimony, given shortly before her disappearance in 2017, the aliens were facing what they called the efficiency paradox. They had achieved perfect logical societies, Martinez testified. No war, no waste, no inefficiency, but in eliminating chaos and unpredictability, they had also eliminated the evolutionary pressures that drive innovation and adaptation. They had become, in essence, too perfect to continue growing. The aliens studying humanity weren't just observers, they were students, trying to understand how a species could remain innovative and adaptive even as it achieved greater technological sophistication. They needed to learn from us as much as they needed to guide us. But this created an unprecedented dilemma for both species. For the aliens, The challenge was how to study and learn from human unpredictability without destroying it in the process. Every intervention they made, every piece of technology they shared, every bit of guidance they provided risked pushing humanity toward the same sterile perfection that had trapped their own civilization. Yet, without some intervention, humanity seemed likely to destroy itself through war, environmental destruction, or technological accidents long before it could develop the maturity necessary for peaceful coexistence with other intelligent species, for humans at least. Those who became aware of the alien presence, the dilemma was equally complex. The aliens offered solutions to virtually every problem facing human civilization: unlimited clean energy, cure for diseases, end to scarcity, eventual elimination of death itself through advanced life extension technologies. But accepting these gifts meant accepting alien guidance that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of human development. It meant becoming something other than purely human, while potentially losing the very characteristics that made humanity valuable to the aliens. In the first place, Colonel James Morrison was a military liaison to one of the classified alien cooperation programs when he began to understand the true complexity of the relationship. In his final report, submitted just before his early retirement in 1998, Morrison described the profound ethical challenges facing both species. We're not just dealing with technology transfer or even cultural exchange, Morrison wrote. We're dealing with the fundamental question of what it means to be human, and whether that meaning is compatible with the kind of advancement necessary for survival in a universe populated by other intelligent species. Report described aliens who seemed genuinely conflicted about their role in human development. Chapter 13. The Revelation Protocols. The plan was always to tell us eventually, hidden in the deepest vaults of the Pentagon, beyond security clearances that most generals never achieve, sits a document known as the Disclosure Protocol, written and revised over decades by joint human-alien committees. It outlines the carefully orchestrated process by which humanity would gradually be prepared for the revelation of non-human intelligence on Earth. The protocol wasn't created in response to pressure from UFO researchers or demands for government transparency. It was created because both species understood that the secret couldn't be kept forever. Dr. Stephen Greer, who founded the Disclosure Project and organized press conferences featuring military and intelligence whistleblowers, may have believed he was forcing government transparency, but according to classified documents leaked in 2019, Greer's efforts were actually part of the protocol itself, a carefully managed release of information, designed to gradually accustom the public to the possibility of alien presence. The leaked documents describe something called managed revelation, a psychological warfare technique adapted for peaceful purposes, rather than shocking the public with sudden, overwhelming proof of alien presence. The protocol called for decades of gradual disclosure through multiple channels: popular entertainment, selective document releases, credible witness testimonies, and controlled media exposure. The goal wasn't to hide the truth indefinitely, testified Dr. Margaret Chen, a psychologist who claimed to have worked on the protocol development. The goal was to prepare humanity psychologically for a truth that could fundamentally destabilize society if revealed too abruptly. The protocol identified several stages of human readiness for alien contact. Stage 1 involved introducing the concept of alien life through science fiction and entertainment, allowing people to consider the possibility in a non-threatening context. Stage 2 involved gradual release of government documents acknowledging UFO phenomena without confirming alien origin. Stage 3 was described as credible witness testimony, military personnel, intelligence officers, and government contractors coming forward with first-hand accounts of alien encounters. Stage 4 involved official acknowledgement of unexplained aerial phenomena and the possibility of non-human intelligence. According to the leaked protocol documents, we are currently in Stage 4. The US military's recent acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena and the release of video footage showing objects with impossible flight characteristics weren't spontaneous admissions forced by public pressure. They were carefully timed releases designed to move public opinion toward acceptance of non-human intelligence. But the protocol documents suggest that these recent revelations are just preparation for Stage 5. Controlled contact. This stage involves carefully orchestrated public interactions between humans and alien representatives, designed to demonstrate that the alien presence is benevolent and that cooperation has been ongoing for decades. Stage 6, according to the protocol, is integration, acknowledgement, public revelation that human and alien civilizations have been cooperating for decades and that many of the technological advances of the past century were the result of this cooperation. The final stage, Stage 7, is described simply as new paradigm, the establishment of a publicly acknowledged hybrid human-alien civilization. But the protocol documents also reveal something troubling: significant disagreement among both human and alien factions about whether disclosure should proceed at all. Some alien groups apparently argue that humanity isn't psychologically ready for full disclosure and that premature revelation could trigger social collapse, religious upheaval, and potentially violent resistance to alien presence. These groups favor extending the current phase of secret cooperation indefinitely. Other alien factions contend that continued secrecy is becoming unsustainable and that the growing evidence of their presence makes eventual discovery inevitable. They argue for accelerated disclosure before the revelation occurs through uncontrolled channels that could paint the alien presence in a negative light. Among humans, the divisions are equally complex. Military and intelligence factions worry about losing control over advanced technologies that provide strategic advantages over potential adversaries. They argue that public disclosure would force them to share alien-derived technologies with other nations and potentially hostile groups. Political leaders express concern about the social and economic disruption that could result from public knowledge that many of humanity's greatest technological achievements were actually collaborative efforts with non-human intelligence. Such revelations could undermine confidence in human institutions and capabilities. Religious leaders who have been briefed on the alien presence are divided between those who see it as consistent with divine creation of multiple forms of intelligent life, and those who view it as a fundamental challenge to human-centered theology. But perhaps most significantly, the protocol documents reveal that the timeline for disclosure has been repeatedly accelerated due to factors beyond human or alien control. Climate change, resource depletion, and growing social instability have convinced some alien advisors that humanity needs access to advanced technologies sooner than originally planned. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated humanity's vulnerability to global catastrophes and reinforced arguments that alien medical knowledge could prevent future disasters. Simultaneously, advances in human technology, particularly in surveillance, communications, and space exploration, have made it increasingly difficult to maintain secrecy about alien activities. The growth of private space companies, civilian satellite networks, and amateur astronomical observation means that alien spacecraft and installations are at greater risk of detection by unauthorized observers. According to the most recent protocol revisions, full disclosure may occur within the next decade rather than the originally planned timeline of several decades. The document describes accelerated revelation scenarios, designed to compress the remaining stages into a much shorter time frame, but accelerated disclosure carries greater risks. Rapid revelation could trigger the very social instabilities that the gradual protocol was designed to prevent. Religious extremism, political upheaval, economic disruption, and resistance movements could emerge if humanity feels deceived or manipulated by decades of secrecy. The protocol documents acknowledge these risks, but suggest that they may be preferable to the alternative: uncontrolled disclosure that could occur at any time through accidental discovery, technological surveillance, or deliberate revelation by rogue elements within either species. Most disturbing are the contingency protocols described in the leaked documents. These are plans for managing various worst-case scenarios if disclosure goes badly. Information containment protocols describe methods for discrediting witnesses, suppressing evidence, and managing media coverage if unauthorized revelations threaten the controlled disclosure. Timeline social stability protocols outline martial law procedures and civilian control measures that could be implemented if public reaction to disclosure threatens governmental authority or social order. Species protection protocols describe plans for relocating key human and alien personnel to secure facilities if disclosure triggers violent anti-alien sentiment or attempts to capture alien technology for hostile purposes. The existence of these contingency protocols suggests that both species understand the magnitude of the risk they're taking by proceeding with disclosure. They're preparing for the possibility that revelation of the truth could destroy the very cooperation they're trying to acknowledge publicly, but they're also preparing for the possibility that continued secrecy could be even more dangerous. The protocol documents suggest that both species have reached a point where the costs of maintaining the secret may outweigh the risks of revealing it. We may be living through the final stage of the most carefully orchestrated revelation in human history. Every UFO disclosure, every government acknowledgement, every credible witness testimony may be part of a process designed to prepare us for a truth that will fundamentally change our understanding of our place in the universe. The question is not whether full disclosure will occur. According to the protocol documents, it's inevitable. The question is whether humanity is psychologically, socially, and politically ready for what that disclosure will reveal about the last 70 years of our history and what it means for our future as a species. Epilogue: the hidden truth. As the first light of dawn breaks across the Nevada desert, illuminating landscapes that have witnessed 70 years of secrets, we're left with questions that may be more important than answers. Have we been alone on this planet? The evidence we've explored suggests that we haven't been, not for decades. From the crash sites of the 1940s to the hybrid children walking among us today, from the underground facilities beneath our feet to the technologies that transformed our civilization. The fingerprints of another intelligence appear woven throughout the fabric of modern human existence. But perhaps the more profound question is this: if we share our world with visitors from among the stars, what does that mean for our future as a human species? The story we've followed through these chapters isn't just about alien visitation or government cover-ups. It's about transformation. It's about two species encountering each other across the vast emptiness of space and discovering that their futures might be inextricably linked. The hidden visitors, if they exist, as the evidence suggests, didn't come as conquerors or saviors. They came as partners in an experiment whose outcome will determine the nature of intelligence itself in our corner of the universe. They brought knowledge and technology, but they also brought questions about what it means to be conscious, creative, and alive in a cosmos that may be teeming with forms of awareness we've barely begun to imagine. We've seen how this partnership, conducted in shadow and secrecy, may have accelerated human development by centuries. Technologies that seemed like miraculous breakthroughs may actually have been collaborative achievements. Medical advances that saved millions of lives may have incorporated non-human knowledge of biology and healing. Even our understanding of physics and the universe itself may have been shaped by perspectives that evolved under alien stars. But we've also seen the costs. The secrecy that protected this collaboration has created a shadow government that operates beyond democratic oversight. The hybrid beings born from this cooperation exist between worlds, belonging fully to neither. The very success of the partnership may be transforming humanity into something that our ancestors wouldn't recognize as human at all. If the disclosure protocols we explored are real, then we may be living in the final chapter of this long deception. The gradual revelation of non-human intelligence on Earth may be designed to prepare us for an acknowledgement that will reshape every aspect of human society. But are we ready? Can any species be ready to learn that its entire modern history has been shaped by collaboration with beings from another world? Can we accept that our greatest achievements may have been joint ventures rather than purely human accomplishments? Can we embrace a future where human consciousness is just one note in a cosmic symphony of intelligence? The desert keeps its secrets, but not forever. The installations hidden beneath the sand, the aircraft that move through our skies with impossible grace, the beings who walk among us with memories of distant worlds, all of these may soon emerge from the shadows into the full light of human awareness. When that happens, we'll face choices that will echo through the centuries ahead. Do we resist this transformation and try to preserve humanity as it was? Do we embrace it and accept that our future lies among the stars rather than solely on Earth? Or do we somehow find a middle path that preserves what makes us essentially human while opening us to possibilities we can barely comprehend? Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this hidden history is what it suggests about the nature of intelligence itself. If human creativity and unpredictability are valuable enough to attract the attention of advanced alien civilizations, then what we consider our greatest weaknesses, our chaos, our irrationality, our capacity for both profound love and devastating destruction, may actually be our greatest strengths. The hidden visitors may have come to Earth not to change us, but to learn from us. They may have discovered that perfect logical societies become sterile and static, and that true intelligence requires the spark of unpredictability that characterizes human consciousness. If so, then our future together may depend not on becoming more like them, but on helping them remember how to be more like us, not abandoning human nature, but sharing it, not replacing human consciousness with alien logic, but creating something new that incorporates the best of both. The hidden visitors may be walking among us still, in forms we don't recognize, pursuing agendas we don't understand. They may be in our governments and our corporations, our schools and our hospitals, our laboratories and our homes. They may be our colleagues, our friends, perhaps even our family members. But if the evidence we've explored has any validity, they're not there as invaders or manipulators. They're there as partners in the most ambitious experiment in the history of intelligence. The conscious evolution of two species towards something greater than either could achieve alone. The question that began our journey, could aliens already be living on Earth, may have been the wrong question from the start. The evidence suggests they aren't living on Earth so much as living with Earth, integrated into the planet's biological, technological, and consciousness ecosystem in ways that make the distinction between us and them increasingly meaningless. We may not be dealing with alien visitors at all, but with fellow travelers on a journey toward forms of consciousness and capability that neither species could achieve alone. We may be witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in cosmic history, a hybrid intelligence that combines human creativity with alien knowledge, human emotion with alien logic, human dreams with alien capabilities. Whether this transformation represents humanity's greatest triumph or its final chapter remains to be determined. But as we stand at this threshold between secrecy and revelation, between our purely human past and our hybrid future, one thing becomes clear: we are not alone. We may never have been alone, and our future, whatever form it takes, will be written not by humans or aliens, but by the new form of consciousness emerging from their collaboration. The hidden visitors are no longer hidden. They are us. We are them. And together, we are becoming something the universe has never seen before. In the end, perhaps that's enough. Perhaps that's everything the desert remembers, the sky watches, and somewhere in the space between what we were and what we're becoming, the future whispers its secrets to those brave enough to listen.